Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the final evening of Real. My name is Angus. I'm a third year Kent student, and I'm back on your screens, for better or for worse.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a third year Politics and International Relations student. It's always a mouthful. And I also study at the University of Kent. You guys may have seen me doing a few interviews this week, and I'm very pleased to be here with Angus. We have a really exciting evening, and we have Nay speaking to us again about real hope. And there will be time for questions on Slido or YouTube, and the link is already up when they come to you. And then finally, we'll find out who has won our final Just Eat voucher. And I'm really hoping it's me, but I have a feeling it won't be.
I've entered this time, so I've pretty high hopes, to be honest.
I'm not too sure.
We'll see. Anyway, we are going to start with our Would You Rather question, which we posted on our Instagram earlier today. And today it was, would you rather, this is a tough one, I thought, would you rather A, go skydiving wearing a parachute that only has a 50% chance of opening, or B, go scuba diving with an oxygen tank that only has a 50% chance of working?
Okay, so I feel really passionate about this, and I got in a little heated debate with someone, and I am for parachute, okay? Because apparently drowning is one of the worst ways to go. I'm not from experience, I've never drowned. Yeah, but apparently it's like one of the worst ways to go, and I just would rather a quick you're gone rather than, drowning, personally.
But it's not going to be, it will be a quick you're gone, but there'll be like however long of total panic up until that point, which I imagine would be the worst.
I feel like I'd just take that in and just enjoy my last moments.
It's be like, this is it.
This is it.
I knew it was going to end this way.
Yeah, saw it coming from the day I was born. This is how I'm going to die. This is why I don't go skydiving.
Because it's good advice, to be fair. Mm-hmm. I've heard that, again, presumably from different sources, that drowning is actually quite peaceful. And I think if you just sort of embrace it and stop struggling and panicking. Again, I don't know how anyone knows any of this information, to be honest.
Yeah, I wonder who does the research on the worst way to die and who is looking that up, or who is I want to know how they've got their research.
If anyone knows, please put that in the comments. I'm just so curious.
Yeah, me too. I really want to know the validity, big word, well, for me anyway, behind these studies. But yeah, I'm not surprised. I think the fear of the ocean is bigger than the fear of the sky, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't quite as close as I thought it would be.
No. And also we just got a comment saying someone's mum landed in a cow pat, which I think is cow poo.
Oh, that is
when skydiving. So, that would be one way to go. If it didn't come out, that'd be definitely one way.
It is also, thanks Rachel, it is definitely bad either way. I think we can all agree. It is bad either way.
Oh yeah, neither of them are ideal, but this is a would you rather. There's no option C.
Otherwise it would be quite easy.
No. Well, on that note, we are going to have an interview by Emma Scrivener. She's going to speak to us on having hope through mental health issues and how, she was able to find that. So, yeah.
Emma, thank you so much for coming, virtually speaking.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Most people listening are going to be in their teens as they're watching this, and you're going to be speaking about your story today. I'd love to start at the beginning and how life looked for you growing up, and then as you moved into your teens, what life looked like at that stage for you.
Sure. So as you can probably hear, I'm not from around these parts. I grew up in Northern Ireland, part of a really loving and secure family. Not a family of Christians, but just a great family. And I always knew who I was and where I belonged there. I guess I'm really one of life's good girls. I'd love in some ways to say I'm a rebel. This is a story with car chases and male models, and it's really not at all. If you'd met me when I was 3, you'd have found a wee girl who liked smoothing out the sand in the sand pits and chasing the other kids away. So things within the lines, nice and tidy. So the way that I knew who I was I had certain rules or things that were expected of me. I did those things, and that was me. And that worked for me pretty well as a child. But when I became 13, some things in my life changed. My body was changing, but not the way that I saw other women on TV or on magazines. I just didn't look like them at all. My grandfather died. It was the first time I lost someone close to me. I started going along to a church, but the sort of faith I discovered was a God who looked awfully like me, like a headmaster who wanted me to keep rules, not the God of the Bible at all. So all of these different things going on, and they added up to a little girl who felt like the sand was spilling out of her sandpit, and she wanted to get it all back in again. I wanted my body to stop spilling out, and I wanted all these big questions about life and death and who is God and what does it mean to be a woman and what is all of this all about. I wanted them to go away. And at the same time, this was Northern Ireland, I think in the 80s, we were hearing for the first time about a disease called AIDS that no one had really heard much about. All we knew was that it killed you, and we didn't know how you got it. But the big sort of message was, don't get it. And with very little information. So it felt to me like the world was a really scary place. And I guess when you're 13, you can't control very much, but you can control your own body. And it wasn't that I looked in the mirror and I felt like I was fat, in that sense. It was just that I felt messy. I felt like all of my questions were too big for my body, and my body itself was spilling out in ways I hadn't before. And I couldn't answer those big questions, but I could make my body smaller. And it seemed to me like if I could shrink my body, I could also get rid of those questions. I couldn't answer the big things, but I could simplify life to one little thing. Could I be smaller? And that was something I was really good at. Anyway, I got treatment for that. And as I was getting treatment for that, I developed obsessive compulsive disorder, which is, compulsive hand washing, and where you have these horrible anxieties that are only relieved by doing lots of rituals. So there were lots of different sort of mental health things that popped up for me, along with depression and anxiety at the same time. By the time I was 18, I looked a lot better on the outside. The treatment really focused on gaining weight, which is vital, but it's not the only part of the story. And I really felt like I'd messed up and I had to make myself better again. So I threw myself into schoolwork this time. I got a place at university. I got into Oxford, and in my school, that was a big thing at the time. We got a half day off, and it seemed like I was quite successful at uni. I was doing well. I was, the sort of little Irish potato that had made good and sailed across the ocean. But inside, I was just as insecure as before, and getting the grades and things didn't make me feel any better about myself. After uni, I threw myself into some church work that spoke really about a gospel I didn't understand. I understood sin. I understood that I needed to prove myself for God, but I didn't understand who Jesus was, and I didn't understand all the stuff the Bible talks about grace.
Hope then broke in your mid-20s at this stage that you describe arriving at. What began to change? How did it change for you?
Well, I guess it's kind of an event and a process. The event really was, I'd gone away with my husband. We'd gone to a little cottage somewhere because, things were really bad, and I was very, very unwell. My grandmother, who had been one of my best friends from Ireland, died, but I couldn't go to the funeral, which is a big thing in Ireland, as it is everywhere. You have big family funerals. You go, that's how you say bye-bye. And that night, I was staring in front of the fire, and I realised, look, I kind of saw myself from outside, this skeleton, this person who was proving her whole life, trying to prove herself, and yet made herself absolutely nothing, and couldn't even go and say goodbye to the one person in the world that she loved the most. And I think in that minute, I kind of cried out to God, but not the headmaster God that I was trying to serve and prove myself to. We'd been looking at readings from my granny's funeral, and we read from a book in the back of the Bible called Revelation. And there's a description of Jesus in there, and it says, he is He has eyes that are blazing like fire and hair like wool, and he's got a voice like rushing waters. And I read that, and I'd always felt like I was too much for everybody, you know, like there was too, like that mess, there was too much of me, and I needed to shove it all back in. But here was someone who was more intense than me, who blew my intensity out of the water, someone who could look at me and see me and would not be afraid of that. And in fact, he could say, come on, give me more. And so I kept reading. And then there's another description of Jesus. It describes him as being like a lion, the Lion of Judah. And again, you know, when you think about this girl who's desperate to take control, terrified of the world and everything in it, and trying to be God of her own world, here finally was someone who genuinely did have control of everything and who could be trusted. And I didn't have to try and take it on myself. He was Lord. He was a beautiful blazing lion. And I could hand it over to him because everything was in his hands. My life, my big questions, he could answer everything. But then as I turned the page, there was another description of Jesus that struck me even more. It says he's a lion, but he's also like a lamb that's been sacrificed. And that to me was amazing because I think I really felt like I was broken. I felt like I was nothing. And how could this incredible God make himself so small, like a lamb, and be broken willingly, but a sacrificial lamb, a lamb who's broken for other people? So someone who not only understood the brokenness and the pain and the sadness and the shame of my life, but also someone who took it on himself. He said, look, Emma, you don't pay for whatever you think you've done wrong in your own body. I've taken it on mine. That's what I do when I die on the cross. I take all the badness, the things that have been done against you, the things you've done to yourself, the things you've done to others, and not simply the things you think are bad, whether that's an eating disorder or whether you think it's, you know, the ways you've hurt other people, the ways that you've pushed me away, the ways that you've said, I want to be Lord of my own life and I'll do it my way. And I'll say, this is the problem, God, and this is the solution, and I'll do it myself. You can shove off. And someone who saw me really as I was and wasn't afraid, someone who loved me, but also said, Emma, I'm not going to leave you like this. I love you too much. And I think it was this combination of the stunning, beautiful lion in control and the lamb broken for me that brought me to my knees. You know, I'd expected an angry God with a fist who would say, do better, put your socks up, come to me whenever you fixed yourself. And here instead I found the Lord who saw me exactly as I was, who was broken for me, who said, come to me for the bath, come to me to be washed, and I will lead you out. And you don't need to know who you are. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to know what the future holds, because I know it, and you can trust me. So just take my hand for this next step. Take my hand for now, for tonight, and trust me, and I will lead you.
Amazing. I found that interview so incredible, and you know, I think a lot of people have been struggling with some form of mental health issue over lockdown. It might be the smallest thing, or it might be quite overwhelming. Yeah, and I just found that so interesting, and I'm really thankful for Emma for sharing that with us.
Yeah, amazing. We'd now like to welcome Nay back. Welcome back, Nay.
Thanks, Angus.
Give us a talk on hope, I believe, and we're going to have a Slido code coming up in the left-hand corner if you've got any questions at all, and also just shove them in the comments. Slido does work.
Yeah, and you know, I discovered today that actually we hadn't asked you, Nate, who you are, what you do, where you live. We don't know this, so please can you let us know?
Yeah, sure. I think that was because Angus forgot to ask me. Is that right?
Don't need to point fingers, I don't think, do we?
I think so.
Yeah, so I think I did say actually Monday, I live in Southampton, married to John, who's a scientist, got 2 little girls, Anya and Agnes, which sounds a bit like Angus, so really you should have got that. And I work with Christian unions around Europe, trying to help female communicators. and give them confidence in what they're doing. So that's a great job. But it's been really great to be with you this week virtually. I wish I could have been in Canterbury in person. But yeah, thanks so much. And I have really appreciated, I'm mocking Angus, but it's been great to just to be with you each evening. So thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure to have you. We are now going to subject you to the would you rather question as we do.
Oh no, I thought you'd just forgotten about that. I'm not going to answer. It's just too terrible. Life, like there is no hope, right? That is the point of the title tonight. How can you ask that awful question? I'm sorry, like I'm either drowning in my head, which is terrible, or I'm just like landing in a cowpat, which is just like as bad. So I'm not, I know you said there's no other option, but there is, and I'm not answering it.
Okay, can I ask an alternative question?
As long as it's not to do with drowning or like landing in cowpat.
What is the best way to cook a potato?
Oh, that's so much nicer. I mean, I think chips, probably, with a really nice salad of some sort.
Okay.
Or roast potatoes with chicken. Yeah, either of those would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
That's okay. And on that really positive note, we'll leave you and give you the floor now.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Well, it's really good to be with you again tonight. And as always, we've been asking questions right at the start. And the question today was, what are you hoping for in 2021? And there's been some really great answers. So let's just have a look at those. So thanks, Bryony. I'm hoping to see and hug friends and family in 2021. I hope so too. Thanks, Andrew. Football stadiums to reopen. Thanks, Christine. Hoping to go home and see my family, to go on a girls' holiday. Thanks, Becca. To go and watch a movie in the cinema. Wouldn't that be nice? There's so many things. Thanks so much for answering that question. In some ways, it's a bit sad, isn't it? The kind of things that we're hoping for used to be just normal, everyday life. And yet now the thought of going to a cinema or having a holiday with the girls or going back to Canterbury, thanks, Erin, you know, all those things that were just so normal are now just complete treats. So for me, the most exciting thing that I think I've done all week is go to Marks and Spencer's with my 8-year-old daughter at 10 in the morning, and we wandered around and just had a look and sprayed perfume and looked at the food. So life has changed so much, hasn't it? And what we're hoping for in 2021 is so different from what we were hoping for in 2019 or 2018. And tonight we really want to ask the question, in a world that's losing hope, is there any hope actually left? And I don't know what your year has been like. I found Emma's testimony so moving, and maybe that's really touched you tonight. I don't know how much hope you've got coming into this evening, but certainly if we had any foolish hopes about human culture, about humanity's ability to be God, they're now shattered, aren't they? You see, COVID-19 is bringing into focus a clarity on who we are and just how fragile we are. Even though we've got this incredible vaccine, I think the scientists are just outstanding in what they've done. Even our hope in the vaccine, we don't know completely, do we, what will happen? Whether that AstraZeneca one's going to be 2/3 less effective than the Pfizer one with the new South African variant. Many of us were putting our hope into the vaccine, but even that we're not completely sure. My hope right now is that on Monday, Boris says schools can reopen again and that my kids can go back to school. So the question is, what's your hope for 2021? And in a world that's losing hope, is there any hope left at all? I'd like to say that we've never experienced this much disappointment and disillusionment with how things are going in our country ever before. Why? Well, I think the answers are really complicated, but I'd like to drill down just on one tonight, on one factor. And I guess the best way of talking about this would be to use the word hope, that we're having a crisis of hope. So again, back in the chat function, I'd love you to have a go at this question. Where do you see a lack of hope or evidence of a crisis of hope in our society or in your family? So let me say that again. Where do you see a lack of hope or evidence of a crisis of hope in our society or in your family or your life? Have a go at just answering the chat for me. I'd love to see what you've got to say. We'll see who the fastest typist is. It's probably not going to be our friend Angus, is it? So where do you see a lack of hope and a crisis of hope, either in your family or society? Thanks, Sarah. A lack of hope in our government. Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? The health of grandparents, absolutely. So SO155 has just got the South African variant. My stepdad lives about half a mile from there. Absolutely. Health of grandparents and parents. Anyone else, where do we see a lack of hope or a crisis of hope in our society? Thanks, Holly. The mental health pandemic, absolutely. I mean, doctors were predicting this in May, weren't they? That the biggest problems weren't going to be COVID patients. They knew how to deal with that on some level. The real fallout would be the non-COVID patients, and one of that is mental health. Thanks, Holly. Anyone else? Where do we see a crisis of hope in our family or in our society? Keep on sending your comments in. So I'd like to say that we're going through this crisis of hope in our society. But the question we're asking tonight is, in a world that's losing hope, is there any left? And I've been asked to speak from a Christian perspective on this tonight. And I'd love to say that Christianity gives us resources for both cultural and personal hope that are unparalleled. And Emma talked about that, didn't she, in her own struggles in life. These resources for both cultural and personal hope are unparalleled. The Christian message has astounding resources for hope, and we're going to explore that a bit this evening. You see, Jesus called his message good news because help is at hand, whatever help it is that you need tonight. Jesus knew that the fatal disease within human nature can only be cured by the divine surgeon. Our only hope of remedy is if God does something. And according to Jesus in the Gospels, he has. So we're going to look in a minute at what that hope is. You see, the remedy and the proof of Jesus' love behind it are seen most compellingly in the cross and the death of Jesus. At the point where criminal disgrace, excruciating pain, and the sin of the world pierced the heart of God's Son. That's where the proof of his love really is. That may seem like an utter mystery, yet it is the crux of the Christian faith. It did not make sense to the disciples initially, and maybe it doesn't readily make sense to you tonight. How can killing someone make sick people like Emma, like you, like me, how can it make us well? Or how can it make messed up, sinful people forgiven? Well, it's only in the cross, however hidden, is there means of deliverance, of wholeness, and of peace. And it's only in what looks like a dead end do we have hope of a new start. And so we just want to explore that with you tonight and invite you to look at it for yourself. So people thought that the crucifixion, when Jesus died on the cross, ended any possibility of Jesus being the Messiah, the Saviour. You see, for the Romans, crucifixion was the ultimate demonstration of weakness and failure. And maybe when you think about Jesus, this Saviour dying on a cross, maybe that's what you think. He was weak. It was a demonstration of failure. For the Jews, on the other hand, it was the final proof that he was a blasphemer and a fraud. To die in such a way could only mean that he had been rejected by God himself. A crucified Messiah was no Messiah at all. Case closed, end of story. Except if you've been tracking Mark's gospel, if you've been reading it on your own, and if you haven't, I recommend you do. Except, of course, that Jesus had said that this was exactly how things were going to happen. You see, he told his disciples throughout Mark's gospel on several occasions how he would be betrayed and abandoned by his friends. He was rejected by his people and handed over to suffer and die at the hands of the Romans. And he also said something else repeatedly. After explaining how the Son of Man, that's Jesus, would have to die, he went on to say, and 3 days later, he will rise. These warnings were so unthinkable at the time, and the events so terrible when they finally took place, that Jesus' words had apparently been ignored and were now forgotten. They made no sense to his followers and therefore offered them no comfort or hope. And maybe you feel like that tonight. But no one was expecting what would happen next. I'm just going to read briefly a passage from 1 Corinthians because it describes what happens next. It says this: "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom were still living." So only through taking the root cause of pain and suffering upon his own shoulders, our own corruption, and suffering the pain of the cross on our behalf, can Jesus bring transformation. As Emma was saying, Jesus takes upon himself the punishment of God at all our failure. He bears it all. And that means not only that forgiveness can be offered to all people like you and me, it offers a new start to the entire universe. It gives us hope. If Jesus was to overcome the world, he must die. And because he died, we can be offered forgiveness and a fresh start right now, tonight. He also invited a world that he will make new, a world without decay and death, without duplicity and disappointment. You see, that passage that I read is all about the resurrection of Jesus. And without the resurrection of Jesus, everything falls apart. There is no Christianity. After he died and then rose again, the prime witnesses to the most important event in the whole story were women. But they were women in tears. And at that point in history, it was so counterintuitive that nobody would have made it up. They were the first people to tell others that Jesus was alive again. So tonight, the Christian hope is this: Jesus Christ, a human being who lived and died in history, then was raised from the dead, and he was raised from the dead in history, and he was seen. And this proves that there is something beyond the grave. There is hope. This proves that there is something. There is a transcendent reality beyond this imminent reality that we see. And that's what's going to satisfy our hopes. However much we hope for cinema and hugging family and friends, and for this virus to be gone and for the vaccine to work, it's only this beyond imminent reality that's going to deeply satisfy our hopes. So the cross enables us to see our problem and how God has solved it. The resurrection is where we see whether human behavior can be changed, and if so, how. So Christianity hinges on it. So let's go back and see what happened. I think up on the screen, you'll see just a few verses from Mark's Gospel, Mark chapter 16. And it talks about this here. So I'm just going to read this for us. When Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were there on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Don't be alarmed, he said. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. But we know eventually they must have said something because the early church grew. And many of your friends here tonight, many of us are part of the church that grew from those women and their story. So over the millennia, Christians have looked to the most surprising part of Jesus' story. And maybe you find it a surprising story tonight. His physical resurrection from the dead on the third day. And to answer this question, what does Jesus' resurrection show? Well, amongst other things, that even death, not even death, could beat him. Even this death that we're talking about with the would you rather, even death could not beat him. He has a proven track record of being the champion who can defeat everything that would cause us to say there is no hope. Whatever that is for you tonight. And I do get it. I feel like there's no hope. I'm not even sure, how much everything's going to change in the coming months. When he offers us physical life beyond death in trusting in him, we know it is no vain promise when we look at the death and resurrection of Jesus. So I want us to finish just with a couple of stories of how these truths have impacted other people. Let me tell you about one lady called Joni Erickson. She was a sporty 17-year-old who hit her head diving into the sea with such force that it caused her to break her neck. The accident left Joni a quadriplegic, paralysed from the neck down. At first in hospital, she fought her circumstances bravely. She was determined to walk once again. But over time, she came to realise that she would never walk again. She would never regain the use of her hands and her feet. She felt overwhelmed with the whole spectrum of emotions that she felt: bitterness, disappointment, frustration, resentment, anger, and suicidal depression. But over the next 2 years, through the strong support of her family and friends and her future husband, Joni gradually climbed out of her deep black hole. She learned to paint with a brush between her teeth, and her paintings are now sought after and collected. And somewhere along the way, she began to trust God to face her future with realism. According to her autobiography, at the heart of Joni's transformation were the words from the Gospels. She was helped by the vision of Jesus on the cross. In her words, immobilized, helpless, and paralyzed as she now was. She felt she had a God who understood her. But what helped her most was the future promise of the resurrection, guaranteed by Jesus' own bodily resurrection. She writes this: I have hope for the future now. Jesus speaks of our bodies being glorified in heaven. She says, I now know the meaning of being glorified. It's the time after my death here when I'll be on my feet dancing. She writes, I can scarcely believe it. I with shriveled, bent fingers, atrophied muscle, gnarled keens, and no feeling from the shoulders down, will one day have a new body, light, bright, and clothed in righteousness, powerful and dazzling. Only in the gospel of Christ do hurting people like you and like me and like Joni and like Emma find such incredible hope. You see, it's the physical resurrection of Jesus and the guarantee of the physical resurrection of those who trust him that inspired Joni. And maybe you resonate with Joni's story tonight. Maybe you're stopped from enjoying your life in the way God intended. And I'm sure that is true for many of us because of COVID. For you, though, the thought of enjoying life at all seems very distant. Just getting through the day is a challenge. And this is where the Christian hope is just so amazing. It's not that we will get a consolation prize that will make up for the challenging things that we're going through right now, but it's the best really is yet to come. Jesus' resurrection guarantees that there is a world to come that will be freed and set free from all that once spoiled it. I don't know if you like Lord of the Rings, but about halfway through, Frodo feels like giving up. Do you remember that bit? The darkness is gathering. It seems like evil will win. And Sam turns to Frodo with these words. He says, "It's like the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even the darkness must pass. A new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer." Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. And as you watch these films, I think some of Tolkien's Christian faith comes through in Sam's words. His hope is not just for the world to go back to what it was, but that it will be even better. And this is resurrection hope. So to finish, the resurrection is not just good news for the future, it is also good news for the present, for now. The risen Saviour offers not just hope for the world to come, but also the resources of his power and his grace in the here and now. The risen Lord Jesus has promised to be with his people, not just at the end, but also to the very end. And his invitation of old comes to the here and now. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and you will find rest for your souls." Here is good news indeed for a world marked by loneliness, stress, and a crisis of hope, and the pressure of every kind. So tonight, we in the Christian Union in Canterbury would love to ask you, is there anything keeping you from accepting the resurrection and believing that Jesus is the Christ and the Son of God and receiving the life that he promises? Will you entrust yourself to him tonight? And as Emma was saying, sometimes it can take years and years to realize that actually the story that we've been talking about this week is not a story you've actually believed in before. Maybe tonight you're a doubter and you're not convinced by what I've said and what Joe said this week or what others have said. Doubt must be prepared to face up to evidence. Doubt that buries its head in the sand will get nowhere. The honest doubter must be prepared to look into the story of Jesus. So tonight, we'd like to offer you to find out more. Get in touch with the CU and they'll let you know how to do that. But for those of you tonight that really do want to entrust your life to him, I want to pray for you. So wherever you are, just listen to this prayer as I talk to God. And if you agree with it, say amen out loud or put it in the chat function. Jesus, I think you may be alive and so able to set me free. If you are, please help me to believe as you helped the disciples. I'm sorry that I have lived for myself so long. Thank you that you have lived for me and died for me so that I could be forgiven. I'm willing to trust and follow you. And if you've said that tonight, then please get in touch with one of us. If you're a doubter tonight, come and find out more and prove Jesus to be right or wrong. And if there's anything that is keeping you from accepting the resurrection, please talk to someone that brought you this evening. But thanks so much for listening. Love to hear your questions.
Thank you so much. No, that was so amazing. We already have some questions in, which is amazing. Keep sending them in. So yeah, I'm going to ask the top voted one. This is all very new to me. I believe there is a God and that what you're saying is true. But how do I actually get to know Jesus for myself?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, whoever sent that in. I think the clearest way is that we've been given the Gospels, and these are words about the true word. And so the word is Jesus Christ. And basically, we just need to read these Gospels and look at Jesus. And as we look at the person of Jesus, how he interacted with other people, which is often shocking and surprising, we find out about God himself, because Jesus is the Son of God. And as we look at Jesus, we see the Father, we see the Son, and we also see the Spirit. We talked about that on Monday night. So I 100% think the best way is to look at who Jesus is, and we'll find out more about who God is as we do that. And the great thing about the God we're talking about is that God loves to communicate. He's a personal God. There's not just some big mysticism. He actually wants you to get to know him and him to get to know you. So you can also pray and talk to him as a father and ask him to speak to you, and talk to him and tell him how you're feeling and ask him things too. So I would say try prayer, but also look at the person of Jesus. But thank you, that's a brilliant question.
Thank you. Next question. How can I trust in this hope when everything else has let me down?
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, I think it's the only thing you can trust in. You know, people do really, I let people down, people let me down. And so I think, again, you need to ask a few really big questions. Is this true? Does the Bible make sense? Does it fit with reality? What do I learn from Christian friends who have lived this a little bit longer than me? But I'd say just because people let you down and life lets you down doesn't mean that God will let you down. And my experience throughout my entire life is that people let you down all the time, and I let others down daily. But God doesn't. He's faithful. His character is beautiful, and he's just so different and other to humans. I think that's really important to see. So I would take those specific questions back to God. How can you reassure me of who you are in this specific circumstance? Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, we have another question. So Emma talks about some mental health problems and how God helped her with those. How can I let God into those situations and let him help me?
It's so hard, isn't it? And I've struggled with post-traumatic stress. I've struggled with depression from time to time. And I think sometimes it's really hard to know, because often people say the most ridiculous of things, which is really unhelpful. I personally think in those times it's really worth reading the Psalms, because as you read the Psalms over and over again, there's lament, there's a chance for you to pour out kind of the inner of who you are, and cry out to God. And I mean, it's funny how the percentage of Psalms that are lament Psalms, and yet the number of songs that we sing in church, how many actually lament? So few. And yet, if you actually read the Bible, the scripture that God's given us for us to know him, the Psalms are a great model to lament. And often we don't know what to say, do we? Or what to feel in those awful times and in the dark times. And I think God knows that. I mean, what I've tried to say tonight is on the cross, Jesus was abandoned by his friends. rejected by people, killed, that's fairly terrible, isn't it? And I think in that we have a God who understands suffering and understands abandonment and rejection. And so I would say just call out to him, and get some really good friends that know you and try and explain as much as you can to them. But it may be some of them say some really stupid things. So yeah, that's me being very honest.
Yeah, I think, I think we might have time for one more question, Angus.
Yeah. How can I know that this God is the God that I should believe in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish we could do this one-to-one. I mean, I think personally you just need to really just do some research and some work and ask yourself, what kind of God do you want to believe in? The God that we're talking about is radically different to any other God. He's a personal God. He's a God that comes to rescue people. He doesn't expect them to do the right thing. There's no should about it at all. There's no rules and regulations. So if you want a God that is utterly generous and kind and rescues you in the deepest mess that you've got yourself into, this is the kind of God. I'd say if you want a God where you've got to work yourself up to perfection, where you've got to do the right thing, whether, because of the past things that you've done, there's consequences, then go and look at other gods. Either way, you need to do your own research and find out for yourself what's true, what fits with reality, and is it based on the generous, exuberant kindness, which is what we are saying and communicating of the God that we know from the Bible, most clearly expressed through the person of Jesus Christ. So yeah, thank you. That was a great question.
And so I lied, we have more time than I thought we did. So I'm going to ask you another question. Why do I need to be forgiven?
Wow. Get some kids and a husband. Get some children and a husband, and you won't even be asking that question. I mean, partly I think I just know myself. I'm grumpy, I'm selfish, I don't want to live for other people, I just want to live myself at the centre. And I think when we do that, it's just painful and it breaks people, and it's bad for relationships, it's bad for the world. So I guess I would just say take some time out to reflect. How have you lived with the other people around you? Have you lived with them at the centre, or you at the centre? Because when we live with ourselves at the centre of the world, it's just a total mess. And I would say that's why we need to be forgiven. But ultimately, I'd like to say that we live in a world that's been made by God, and we just turn our back on him and we reject him. And we need to say sorry for that too, because he's made us out of love to be loved, and we just turn our back on him all the time. So sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, because I was laughing more at myself because I know what I've been like today. But I would honestly say do some soul searching and ask your friends and family if they feel you need to be forgiven. But ultimately, there's a God that really, really wants to know us and love us. And I think if you have at all walked away from him, that's a major reason too. So thank you. That was a really good question.
Yeah, another. How do we hope in Jesus like Mary and the other women did when we can't see Jesus like they did?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
I mean, again, we have been given the scriptures really clearly, historical eyewitness accounts that we can trust and believe, and even do some research whether we think the Bible is true or not. So we have been given the person of Jesus in the Gospels. So I would say, firstly, read the Gospels. Ask that question again. I would also say that Jesus promised us the Holy Spirit which is a counselor and a guide and a pointer to Jesus. And so again, we can say, God, are you real? If you are, just help me see that you are real in this world. And I guess when you look even at those eyewitness accounts, there are people who didn't believe in Jesus, but they saw him. So they didn't believe in who he said he was. So I'm not sure that actually seeing him and touching him is all it's cracked up to be. I think the overwhelming growth of the Christian church through centuries points to the fact you don't need to actually see and touch him to know him. There are other ways that you can get to know him, and primarily through reading the Gospels. And I'm pretty sure the CEO are offering anyone that opportunity to just discuss and look at who Jesus is together, to find out if he's who he really said he was, and whether we can put our trust in him, even though he's not sitting in my living room tonight.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That is going to be our last question, I believe. If you have any more at all, we have follow-up forms in the comments. I think probably descriptions as well. Please send them in through that. We also have our socials on Instagram at Real Canterbury 2021, and then Real Canterbury on Facebook. I would just like to thank Nay, who has just disappeared, so much for everything that she said to us this week. We've had some amazing words from her, and she's been such a blessing. So, yeah.
Sure. And we had quite a few questions about that we didn't answer about following Jesus and what that looks like. And we'd love to explore that with you through the Keep in Touch form, or maybe speak to your friend who invited you tonight. We'd love to dig deeper into how that can look in your life. Now, it's the moment everyone has been waiting for, and I'm sure of it. And it's time to announce our final of the week Just Eat voucher winner. If you already won this week, I am very jealous of you because I wish I had. So, yeah, and the winner is, I don't know.
Hey,
Cannon, I think his
Cannon
name.
6516.
Jack, I think is his name. Jack Cannon.
Jack.
Congratulations. I hope you enjoy the food you get on your voucher. You are so very lucky.
Wish it had been me.
Me too.
It wasn't, and that's how it goes. That's all we have tonight. We'd absolutely love to hear from you though, and as we've mentioned, we have the Keep in Touch follow-up forms in the comments. And we as a CU have got a few events which we've got going on. We've got a buddies scheme which we're going to start, where you're going to be able to basically just start a friendship with a member from the CU, go for walks, do whatever's legal together. Who knows what that will be in a week's time. And then we're running an alpha course where if you want to find out more about the Christian faith and more about what we believe, please get in touch with that, because that is an incredible opportunity. And that is us. That is the end of the week. Sarah, can you believe this is the end of the week?
I can. I have a slight plug, Angus, before we end. Radical, I know. Nay was speaking about Mark's Gospel, and in the comments we sent some links to read Mark's Gospel. If you would like a physical copy of Mark's Gospel, please let us know in the Keep It in Touch forms or messages. We have loads of these to give away to you guys if you would like to dive deeper into the Gospel yourself. Sorry for that little plug, everybody, but it is very important. This is it, Angus.
This is us.
This is us, but it doesn't end here.
Yeah, it doesn't end here, exactly. Please get in touch. Please keep in touch. But this is it for the week. Thank you so much, everybody that has come along. Obviously, it is a huge shame that we haven't been able to see any faces, but all of your messages and everything, all of the competitions being involved in that, it's been wonderful to see. Stay safe, look after yourselves, and hopefully we'll hear from you more.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye.